12 years ago, a man in a black robe looked directly at me and told a courtroom full of grieving parents that everything I had documented, everything I had signed my name to, everything I had risked my career to say out loud was not credible enough to matter. He didn't just rule against me, he erased me, and I promised myself I would never again stand in a room with that man and stay silent. Last Tuesday, he walked into my emergency room carrying his 16-month-old daughter, and he didn't even recognize my face, not until I said his name. By the end of that night, I would be the only person standing between his daughter and the same fate as the child whose death he once decided didn't count. And I would have to decide, in real time, whether I was the kind of doctor who could separate what a man did from what his child deserved. I'm Dr. Renee Winters, and this is the story of the night justice finally walked back through my door, wearing a father's face this time, not a judge's. But before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. I want to be honest about something before I tell you the rest. I have spent 12 years believing that if I ever saw Warren Kessler again, I would know exactly what to say to him. I had rehearsed it, in the shower, in traffic, at 2 in the morning when a case from my own past came knocking on the inside of my skull uninvited. I thought I was ready. I was not ready. Here is what I need you to sit with as this story unfolds. What do you do when the man who once decided your evidence, your integrity, and a dead child's memory weren't worth believing is now the one person in the room who needs you to be the best doctor you have ever been? Do you owe him your full effort? Do you owe him anything at all? And when his daughter's life is on the line, does the truth about what he did 12 years ago even matter anymore? Or does it matter more than ever? I didn't have those answers walking into that exam room. I'm not sure I have all of them now, but I know what I chose to do, and I know what it cost me to choose it. To understand why a 16-month-old's fever nearly broke me, you have to understand what happened before she was ever born. 12 years ago, I was 31 years old, 3 years into my career as a pediatric, attending at a hospital I will not name here, though some of you who have followed my other stories already know which one. I was newly married. My husband and I had a 3-year-old daughter at home who called every doctor on television "Mommy's friends" because she genuinely believed I knew everyone who wore a white coat. I did not yet have my son. I did not yet know how much I would need my husband's patience in the years to come, because back then, we were still the kind of married that hadn't been tested by anything larger than sleep deprivation and student loans. That year, a 4-year-old boy named Julian Reyes was admitted to my unit with what looked, on the surface, like a routine viral illness. His mother, a woman named Consuelo Reyes, sat beside his bed for 11 straight hours, telling anyone who would listen that something was wrong beyond what the chart said. I believed her. I documented rising heart rate, dropping blood pressure, and a rash pattern that, in my professional judgment, pointed toward early sepsis, a medical emergency that required immediate escalation. I flagged it. I called it in. I put my name on that concern in writing at 11:40 that night, in a chart that still exists somewhere in a records archive. The attending physician overseeing Julian's case, a senior doctor with 3 decades of seniority over me, disagreed. He believed it was a resolving virus. He did not escalate. By the time anyone did, it was too late. Julian Reyes died 4 days after admission, and his mother buried a child the hospital's own internal review would later admit, quietly, and only after I refused to stop asking questions, showed a documented, ignored warning. I gave a sworn statement. I handed over my own charting, time-stamped and signed, showing exactly when I raised the alarm and exactly how long it sat unanswered. Consuelo Reyes's attorney built the family's malpractice case around it. I sat in that courtroom, my hands folded so tightly in my lap that I left half-moon marks in my own palms, and I watched a judge named Warren Kessler look at my evidence, my signature, my professional record, and rule that it was, his words, insufficiently corroborated to establish a breach of the standard of care. The hospital's case had rested on a single expert witness, paid for by their insurer, a man who had never once examined Julian Reyes. That testimony was accepted without hesitation. Mine, backed by contemporaneous written documentation, was not. The family lost. The senior physician kept his license and his position. I kept my job only because I refused to resign quietly, and because a nurse named Bridget Klein, who had been on shift that night and had seen everything, refused to let the hospital rewrite the story in the break room the way they'd rewritten it in the courtroom. For years afterward, I was the doctor who made things difficult. I was passed over. I was quietly warned by colleagues to stop bringing up Julian Reyes in staff meetings, as though grief had a shelf life the rest of the hospital had already decided I'd exceeded. My husband watched me come home some nights and sit in the car in our driveway for 20 minutes before I could walk inside and be a wife and a mother instead of the woman who had lost in front of a judge. I never forgot Warren Kessler's face on that bench, composed, certain, untouched by what his ruling would mean for a mother who would spend the rest of her life visiting a small grave in a Georgia churchyard. I built my whole career, in some ways, around never letting that happen to another family in front of me, around escalating louder, documenting harder, refusing to be quiet, no matter what it cost me. What I did not know, walking into work on an ordinary Tuesday, 12 years later, was that the story wasn't finished. It had simply been waiting for the right night to come back. The waiting room was already loud when the doors opened. That's usually the first sign something is truly wrong, not the volume of a frightened parent's voice, but the particular pitch of it, the register that says, "This is not a fever we can wait out." A man walked in carrying a limp toddler against his chest, and he was saying her name over and over, "Marlee, Marlee, look at me," in the flat, urgent tone I have heard from 1,000 terrified fathers. I didn't look at his face first. I looked at her, at the mottled gray-purple pattern spreading across her small arms, at the way her head lolled, instead of turning toward the sound of her own name, at her breathing, too fast, too shallow. My body moved before my mind finished processing anything else. "Get her back now," I said to my charge nurse, and we were moving. IV line, oxygen, blood draw, temperature reading of 104.6, before I ever registered who was standing at the edge of the trauma bay, hands pressed flat against the glass, unable to come any closer, because that's our rule, and rules exist for a reason, even on the worst night of someone's life. It was somewhere in the middle of calling out orders. Cultures, fluids, broad-spectrum antibiotics started empirically, before we even had lab confirmation, because with a presentation like this, you do not wait for permission from a lab result, that I finally looked up, and met the father's eyes through the glass. 12 years does something to a face. The dark hair had gone iron gray at the temples. The composed courtroom posture had collapsed into something smaller, more human, more frightened than I ever imagined that particular man capable of looking. But I knew him instantly, the way you know a smell from your childhood before you can name it. Warren Kessler. He did not recognize me, not yet. To him, I was simply the attending physician moving fast around his daughter's bed, calling numbers, calling for a pediatric ID consult, buying time in the only currency that mattered in that room, minutes. It was Marley's mother, arriving 11 minutes later, breathless from a parking garage 3 blocks away, who said my name out loud first, in gratitude, not recognition. Dr. Winters, thank God it's you. They said you were the best in the department for this. And I watched something shift behind Warren Kessler's face as the 2 syllables of my last name reached him. I watched him place it. I watched 12 years fall through the floor of his expression, all at once. Winters, he said quietly, almost to himself, and then, louder, disbelieving, Renee Winters. I did not stop what I was doing. A 16-month-old with a rash pattern and vital signs that mirrored, almost exactly, the presentation I had flagged and been overruled on 12 years earlier, was not a moment I could afford to spend on him. But I felt the whole room narrow, the way it does, right before something becomes unbearable, and I said the only thing I could say, and still be the doctor that child needed me to be. I need everyone who isn't treating this patient to step back and let us work. He stepped back. He pressed his hand against the glass instead, and I saw his mouth form my name again, silently this time, like a man confirming to himself that the worst possible version of this night was, in fact, real. That of every emergency physician in that hospital, on that night, it was mine that his daughter had landed in. We got the antibiotics running within 19 minutes of her arrival. I will tell you, because some of you may be parents who have lived through something like this, that 19 minutes is fast. 19 minutes, in a case like this, can be the entire distance between a child who recovers and a child who does not. I want to walk you through what those 19 minutes actually looked like from the inside, because I think it matters for what comes later. My charge nurse, a steady young woman named Angela Marsh, had 2 lines in before I'd even finished my initial assessment. I called for a stat lactate, a blood culture ×2, a complete blood count, and a basic metabolic panel, and I said the words, possible early septic shock, out loud to the room, because in my department, saying those words out loud is what triggers the entire team to move at a different speed than they would for a routine fever. Somewhere behind me, I heard someone paging pediatric infectious disease. Somewhere behind me, I heard Warren Kessler's voice, muffled through the glass, asking a resident standing near the door whether his daughter was going to die, and I heard the resident give the only honest answer any of us had in that moment, which was that we didn't know yet, and that we were doing everything we possibly could. I have relived this kind of 19 minutes more times in my career than I could count, and every single time, some small, disciplined part of my mind splits off from the rest of me and simply executes the next correct step, and the next, and the next, while the rest of me stays present enough to notice the humanity in the room, the mother's hands shaking as she signed a consent form, the father's forehead pressed to glass, the particular silence that falls over an entire trauma bay when a small child's oxygen monitor dips low enough to trigger an alarm none of us wanted to hear. But fast is not the same as safe. Her blood pressure kept dropping. Her oxygen saturation dipped low enough to make my charge nurse look at me the way nurses look at doctors when they are asking, without words, whether it's time to call the code team to stand by. I ordered a second fluid bolus. I ordered pressors on standby. I stayed exactly where I was, at the head of that bed, watching numbers that refused to stabilize on a child whose father I had spent 12 years trying not to think about. And then, at the edge of my vision, I saw Warren Kessler slide down the wall outside the glass and sit on the floor of my emergency department, his forehead against his knees, praying, actually praying, out loud, quietly, to whatever God a man like that still believed in after a career spent deciding whose truth counted, for the one thing in the world I could not yet promise him. If you've ever sat in a hospital hallway waiting for news you weren't sure was coming, hit like right now. This next part is where everything I believed about fairness got tested. Marley Kessler was admitted to the pediatric ICU 40 minutes later, stable enough to move, but nowhere near stable enough for anyone to exhale. I stayed 2 hours past the end of my shift, because that is what I do, and because some small, unhealed part of me needed to know, needed to prove to myself, that this time, the outcome would be different. I checked her labs twice, before the results were even fully processed. I sat with the ICU attending, a careful, thorough physician named Dr. Curtis Ellery. No relation, I want to be clear, to any name from my past, simply a coincidence of a common surname in this profession, and walked him through every decision I'd made in the trauma bay, every reason I'd escalated as hard as I had, as fast as I had. It was near midnight when hospital counsel found me in the staff lounge. His name was Roland Fitzgerald, a trim, unhurried man I had crossed paths with exactly twice before, both times over documentation disputes that had nothing to do with me personally. This time was different. "There's a concern," he said, in the particular tone institutions use when they mean there is a liability question, about your history with the child's father. I told him the truth. I told him that 12 years ago, Warren Kessler had presided over the Reyes malpractice case, that he had ruled against evidence I personally provided, that I had never spoken to him since that day in that courtroom, and that none of it had influenced a single order I wrote for his daughter tonight. I told him my charting would show exactly that, time-stamped, the same as it always did, the same as it had 12 years ago, when the truth hadn't been enough to matter to anyone with the authority to act on it. Fitzgerald suggested, delicately, that another attending take over Marley's care going forward, simply to remove any appearance of conflict. I understood the institutional logic. I also understood, standing in that lounge at midnight, with my hands still smelling of hospital soap, that I was being asked, again, by a hospital, to step back from a child whose survival depended on the person in the room who understood her case best. I did not raise my voice. I have learned, over 12 years, that raising my voice in rooms like that one only gives people permission to stop listening to the substance of what I'm saying. I asked for the ICU records to reflect that Dr. Ellery, not I, would be the attending of record going forward for Marley's ongoing care, a decision I made freely, not because I believed I had done anything wrong, but because I refused to give anyone, ever again, a reason to say a Kessler child's outcome had been compromised by a Winters grudge. I would consult. I would not lead. Fitzgerald seemed relieved. I felt something colder than relief, something closer to déjà vu. Word moves through a hospital, the way water moves through old plumbing. You don't see it, but you hear it in the walls. By morning, a rumor had reached the nurses' station that I had gone cold on the Kessler case, out of old resentment, that I'd been the one to request removal, that some believed I'd wanted nothing to do with saving that judge's daughter. Nurse Bridget Klein, the same nurse who had refused to let the hospital erase Julian Reyes's story 12 years earlier, found me in the supply room and told me, flatly, that she wasn't going to let that rumor stand either. "I remember exactly what you did for that boy," she said. "I'm not going to watch them turn it into the opposite story for this one." Meanwhile, Marley's condition seesawed for 2 full days. A blood culture came back suggesting a resistant strain, which meant a change in antibiotics, which meant another 12 hours of uncertainty layered on top of the uncertainty that had already worn her parents down to something raw and wordless. Priscilla Kessler, Marley's mother, began seeking me out during rounds, not her husband, me, to ask quiet, specific, well-informed questions about the treatment plan, the kind of questions that told me she had been reading everything she could find at 3 in the morning to understand what was happening to her daughter. On the second afternoon, I found myself paged back to the ICU by Dr. Ellery for a consult, because a new rash pattern had appeared along Marley's trunk, and he wanted a second clinical opinion before adjusting her antibiotic coverage further. Standing at that bedside again, close enough to touch the same monitor cables I'd first placed 2 nights earlier, I felt the whole weight of Julian Reyes's case settle over me in a way I hadn't fully braced for. I remember thinking, quite clearly, that if this child died, despite every correct decision being made in time, I did not know whether I had the strength left in me to survive watching it happen a second time, in front of the same man who had once decided a warning like mine wasn't worth believing. I did not say any of that out loud. I simply reviewed the rash, agreed with Dr. Ellery's plan to broaden coverage further pending final culture sensitivities, and documented my consult the same exhaustive way I document everything. Because if there is one lesson 12 years ago taught me, it is that the paper trail is sometimes the only thing standing between the truth and a version of events someone more powerful would prefer to tell instead. It was during one of those hallway conversations that Priscilla said something that stopped me cold. "Warren told me who you are," she said. "He told me what happened. He said if anyone in this hospital could save her, it would be you, and he hated himself for how much that terrified him." I did not know what to do with that sentence. I still am not entirely certain I do. On the 3rd night, while I was reviewing Marley's chart alone at the nurses' station well past midnight, Warren Kessler approached me for the first time since the trauma bay. He looked as though he had aged another 5 years in 3 days. He did not ask about his daughter's prognosis, which I found strange, until I understood why. "I need to tell you something about the Reyes case," he said. "Before anything else happens with Marley, I need you to hear it from me, and not from someone else, because I think you deserve to have heard it a long time ago." Before I tell you what he said, drop a comment and tell me, would you even give a man like that the chance to explain himself? I want to know what you would have done standing where I was standing. I told him I was listening. I did not sit down. I did not soften my expression. 12 years of composure did not simply dissolve, because a man finally looked ready to talk. The insurer's attorney submitted a supplemental filing 2 days before closing arguments, he said. It included a signed statement from a second physician, someone I'd never heard mentioned in testimony, who claimed he'd independently reviewed Julian's chart in real time and concurred with the senior attending's assessment that the presentation was consistent with a resolving virus. I weighed that filing against yours. At the time, I believed I was weighing two credible clinical opinions against each other and choosing the one corroborated by two physicians instead of one. There was no second physician, I said. My voice did not shake, though something underneath it did. I know that now, Warren said. I've known it for 6 years. He told me the investigator's name, the docket number of the ethics proceeding, the exact date he'd first read the finding, details offered with the specificity of a man who has memorized his own failure the way some people memorize scripture, turning it over so many times in private that the facts have worn smooth. He told me he'd requested, and received, a complete unredacted copy of the ethics panel's report the week it was finalized, and that he had read it alone in his chambers on a Saturday, twice through, before he ever told his own wife what it contained. He told me that for the first several months afterward, he had genuinely believed the correct and honorable path was total silence, that reopening old wounds for a grieving mother with no legal avenue left to pursue would only cause additional harm without any corresponding remedy. It was, he admitted, a conclusion that conveniently protected him from ever having to have this exact conversation. I've asked myself many times since, he said, whether the silence was really about protecting Consuelo Reyes from false hope, or protecting myself from having to say, out loud, to another human being, that I got it wrong in a way that cost a child his life. I don't think I can fully separate those two motives anymore, even now. I think they were tangled together from the beginning, and I let the more comfortable one lead. 6 years. I made him repeat the number because I needed to be certain I had heard him correctly the first time, and because some petty, exhausted part of me wanted to watch him say it twice. He told me the rest slowly, the way people speak when they have rehearsed a confession so many times in private that saying it out loud for the first time feels almost unfamiliar. 6 years after the Reyes verdict, Warren was appointed to a state judicial ethics review panel investigating an unrelated malpractice insurer for a pattern of submitted expert testimony across several cases. In the course of that review, an investigator flagged a physician's name that had appeared uncredentialed and unverifiable in a handful of malpractice defense filings over nearly a decade, including, buried in an appendix, nobody on the original defense team had expected anyone to revisit, the Reyes case. The independent physician, whose concurring opinion had helped tip Warren's ruling against a written, time-stamped, sworn account from an actual treating doctor, had never examined Julian Reyes. He had never set foot in that hospital. He was a retired physician on the insurer's approved witness list who reviewed summarized case notes for a flat fee and rendered opinions that, with striking consistency, favored the insurer's position. The ethics panel's findings were damning enough that the physician voluntarily surrendered his license rather than face a hearing. The finding was filed, quietly, in a state record most people will never read. I could have reopened it, Warren said. Legally, procedurally, it would have been extraordinarily difficult. The statute of limitations on the underlying case had long since closed, and reopening a closed civil verdict based on a witness credibility finding from an unrelated ethics proceeding would have required the family to initiate an entirely new action at their own expense, against odds I genuinely could not promise them. I told myself that was the reason I didn't reach out to you, or to Consuelo Reyes, directly. I told myself the ethical thing was to let the findings stand in the public record and trust that the truth existed somewhere, even quietly. That's not the same as telling the truth to the people who needed to hear it, I said, and I meant every word of it, because a quiet correction filed somewhere in a state record is not the same thing as looking a grieving mother in the eye. No, he said, it isn't, and I've known that too, for 6 years. What Warren told me next, I want to be honest, complicated the anger I had carried for over a decade in ways I did not expect and did not entirely welcome. After the ethics finding, he had quietly petitioned, through judicial administrative channels rather than open court, for a change in how his state's family and civil courts weighed contemporaneous medical documentation against paid expert testimony in malpractice proceedings. A reform that 3 years later passed as a minor procedural rule change most attorneys in that state now cite without knowing its origin. He had also, anonymously, established a modest scholarship in Julian Reyes's name at a nursing school 2 counties from where the trial had taken place, funded entirely from his own salary, never once contacting Consuelo Reyes directly, because, in his words, I did not believe I had earned the right to reach out to that woman and make my guilt her burden to manage. I stood in that hallway holding 2 facts that did not resolve neatly into each other. A man who had, at the most critical moment of my professional life, ruled against the truth and let a grieving mother lose in a courtroom, and the same man who had spent 6 subsequent years trying, quietly, imperfectly, without ever seeking credit or absolution, to make something structurally better out of what he'd gotten wrong. I asked him why the scholarship, and why Julian's name specifically, and not some broader, safer gesture that wouldn't risk anyone ever connecting it back to the case. He said that anonymity had never been about protecting his reputation. His name appeared nowhere on the paperwork, not even in the small print most donors quietly insist on somewhere. It had been, he said, the only way he could think to make Julian Reyes's name mean something other than a line item in a closed docket. A nursing student 2 counties away, studying pediatric care on a scholarship funded in a dead child's memory, was, in his words, the smallest, least adequate thing I could think to do, and also the only thing that felt honest instead of self-serving. Why now? I asked. Why tell me this now, tonight, instead of 6 years ago? Warren looked through the glass at his daughter's small chest rising and falling under the ICU monitors before he answered me. I remember thinking, in that pause, how strange it was to watch a man who had once seemed so entirely composed on a bench above a courtroom, now standing in a hospital corridor, unable to find his own words, quickly, as though 12 years of practiced certainty had finally run out on him in the one place it mattered least to a judge and most to a father. Because 6 years ago, it was still an abstraction to me, he said, a finding in a file, a wrong I intended to correct in the only ways I believed were available to me. Tonight, watching you save my daughter's life with the same clinical instinct I once ruled insufficiently corroborated, I finally understood, in my body, and not just my conscience, exactly what I took from Julian Reyes and his mother. I don't expect that to mean anything to you. I needed you to know it anyway. If a confession like that would be enough for you, or if you think it changes nothing at all, comment and let me know which side of that line you're standing on, because I still don't fully know which side I'm on. Marley Kessler turned a corner on the 4th day. Her fever broke overnight, her blood pressure stabilized without pressors, and by the following afternoon, she was sitting up in her mother's lap, gripping a fistful of Priscilla's hair and shrieking with the particular delighted outrage of a toddler who has decided she is done being sick and would like everyone to know it immediately. I stood at the doorway of that room longer than I needed to, watching a family exhale for the first time in 4 days, and I let myself feel, without apology, the enormous relief of a story that did not end the way Consuelo Reyes's story had ended. Discharge day. Warren Kessler found me one final time, in the same hallway where he'd first told me the truth. He did not ask me for forgiveness directly. I want to be precise about that, because I think it matters. He said only this: I know I don't get to ask you to forgive what happened to Julian and his mother. That was never mine to be forgiven for, on your behalf or hers. What I can tell you is that I've spent 6 years trying to make sure the system that failed her fails fewer families going forward, and I will keep doing that, whether or not it ever squares anything between us. I told him something I had not planned to say, and have thought about every day since. I told him that I did not forgive him that afternoon, in that hallway, and that I was not certain I ever fully would, that some debts are not mine to forgive on Julian Reyes's behalf, and that Consuelo Reyes, wherever she is today, is the only person whose forgiveness would actually mean something to the record of what happened to her son. But I also told him that watching a man carry 6 years of quiet, uncredited repair work, without ever once trying to use it to buy his way back into my good opinion, had shown me something about accountability I hadn't expected to learn from him, of all people. Fix the next case, I told him. Fix it before it happens, not after. That's the only apology that has ever meant anything to me, and it's the only one I actually have any use for. He nodded, and for the first time since I'd known him, on the bench or off it, I watched Warren Kessler look like a man who understood exactly how small an apology is next to the work of actually changing something. I called Consuelo Reyes myself 2 weeks later. I had not spoken to her in nearly a decade, not since the last difficult, grief-soaked conversation we'd had after the verdict, when neither of us had the language yet to carry what had happened to us. I told her what I had learned about the false witness, about the ethics finding, about the procedural reform that now quietly exists in her state's courts because of what happened to her son. I did not tell her about the scholarship fund, because Warren asked me not to, and because I have come to believe some forms of amends are not owed publicity in order to be real. Consuelo was quiet for a long time on the phone. Then she said, 12 years, and somebody finally said his name out loud in a room that mattered. I have not stopped thinking about that sentence since. I don't know if what Warren Kessler did in the years after Julian's death balances what he failed to do the day he made his ruling. I'm not sure balance is even the right way to think about grief, or guilt, or the slow, uneven work people do to become someone better than the version of themselves that caused the harm in the first place. What I know is that Marley Kessler is alive and growing, and will likely never know how close her father once came to being remembered by me only as the man who cost a mother her son. What I know is that I am still, 12 years later, the doctor who documents everything, who escalates loudly, who refuses to be quiet, and that this time, for once, someone with the power to have silenced me instead chose, finally, to listen. I told my husband the whole story the night Marley was discharged, sitting at our kitchen table, long after our own son and daughter had gone to bed. Nathaniel listened, the way he always does, when I bring him the heaviest parts of my work, without interrupting, without rushing to tell me how to feel about it. When I finished, he asked me only one question: whether I thought I would have made the same choice, full effort, no less than my best, if Warren Kessler had never said a word to me about the ethics finding, if he'd simply stayed the composed, unrepentant man I remembered from that courtroom. I told him yes, without hesitation, because that answer was never actually about Warren Kessler. It was about Marley, and about the kind of doctor and the kind of person I had already decided a long time ago I was going to be, regardless of who was standing on the other side of the glass. That is, I think, the part of this story I keep returning to in the weeks since. Not whether Warren Kessler deserves whatever peace he's built for himself out of 6 quiet years of atonement, but the fact that showing up fully for someone who once failed you completely is not the same as forgiving them, and it is not the same as forgetting what happened, and it does not owe anyone an explanation. It is simply what it means to be the person I decided to become the day I watched Consuelo Reyes bury her son and swore I would never let silence win in a room I was standing in again. I've told you a lot of hard stories from my life over the course of this channel, but this is the first one where I genuinely don't know if I made the right choice, and I think that's exactly why I needed to share it with you. Was I right to treat Warren Kessler's daughter with everything I had, knowing what he once did to a family I still think about? Was I right to step back from being her attending, even though I believed, and still believe, that I hadn't done anything wrong? Was I right to tell him I didn't forgive him, even after everything he told me about the years since? I would genuinely love to know what you think, so please, leave a comment below and tell me honestly where you land on this one. I read every single one of them, even the ones that push back on me. If this story moved you even a little, do me a favor and hit that like button before you go. It genuinely helps more people find these stories, and more than that, it lets me know which parts of my life are actually landing with you. And if you know someone, a sister, a friend, a co-worker in scrubs just like mine, who would sit with this story the way you just did, send it their way. Some of these stories are easier to carry when you're not carrying them alone. I also want to ask you to turn on notifications for this channel, because my story is nowhere near finished. There are things happening in my marriage, in my son's life, in my relationship with my mother-in-law that I haven't told you yet, and I don't want you to miss the next chapter when it comes. If you haven't already, subscribe. It costs nothing, and it means everything to a channel like this one, built entirely on true stories from one woman's life. And before you go, one more thing, because I ask this every time, and I mean it every time. Tell me in the comments where in the world you're watching this from tonight. I have started keeping a mental map of every place this story has reached, and it has become one of my favorite parts of sharing my life with you. Thank you for sitting with me through this one. I'll see you in the next chapter.